Hey everybody, welcome to DadsDen of Pop Culture. For fans, the story is familiar. Two American astronauts crash land on a world ruled by apes. Yes, the damn dirty kind. The astronauts are captured, but of course escape, and in this version are joined by a rebellious ape named Garland. These three wander around a post-apocalyptic Earth, getting involved in the lives of others and frustrating the ape overlords. We're talking about the Planet of the Apes television show from 1974. Now, Planet of the Apes, of course, began as a book by Pierre Boule, published in 1963, which tells a story different, but not entirely, from the more famous film starring Charlton Heston that came out in 1968. Boule's apes wear suits, they drive cars, they are, in fact, aping the human beings that they displaced years earlier, maybe centuries earlier. They were servants to the human beings who eventually just turned their lazy, stupid, worthless masters out into the wild, where they started to live like animals. Now, the apes made some technological process after that point, but it was agonizingly slow. They're great at imitating, but terrible at innovating. Oh, and also, their planet orbits Betelgeuse, so it's not really Earth after all. Kind of like the idea of parallel development of worlds you got in Star Trek. At any rate, go read the book and you will find out. Now, in the film version, the apes have inherited a world destroyed by nuclear war. It's post-apocalyptic, all right, like the TV show. They have firearms and a technology not maybe dissimilar to the Wild West. And they see human beings as a plague, as the destroyers of the world. All the while, of course, Dr. Zaius hides his knowledge that humans once ruled the planet and were technologically superior to apes. Now, again, this happens in the book, Zaius knowing these things, and it is a theme that's carried in the TV show. 1968's Planet of the Apes was very popular, so of course there were sequels and toys and comic books. It was very similar to the Star Wars phenomenon that would follow it. Well, in 1970, Beneath the Planet of the Apes continued the first film and ended with the destruction of all life on Earth. Yes, those happy 1970s sci-fi films. But the story wasn't over. In 1971's Escape from the Planet of the Apes, two apes, our friends Cornelius and Zira, escape the Earth's destruction in Taylor's old spaceship with another ape. They travel through a time warp that brings them to 1973 Earth, where they become celebrities. Naturally, since it's the 1970s, everything goes horribly wrong. But most importantly, their time travel changes the course of Earth's future history. So Taylor's adventures in the Earth's destruction, well, they might not happen. Again, it's hard to say for sure. In Conquest of the Planet of the Apes from 1972, the Earth has suffered a pandemic that killed all the world's cats and dogs. Seriously. Apes become people's pets. And then, as they seem to be somewhat evolved, they become slave labor in an America that is divided into numerous police states. Now, one ape, Caesar, can speak, and he leads a rebellion and sees the birth of the Planet of the Apes. In 1973, Battle for the Planet of the Apes moves things forward in this new parallel reality to 2670 AD. It tells the history of ape civilization when Caesar began a new society that proffered peace between apes and humans, with apes still remaining dominant. Now, this is opposed by a guerrilla general named Aldo. We wind up in this big final battle and the establishment of equality between humans and apes. So, now, of course, in this version, the future human beings are not sort of like mindless animals. They can think, they can speak, etc. It's a very 1970s film series, to be sure. And I can tell you, though, when we were kids, you did not pass up one of the Apes films on TV. Apes, Godzilla, War of the Worlds, all must-sees for us Gen X kids, especially if, we didn't have like HBO or something. Well, the television series premiered the next year and worked within a similar frame as the final film. The year is 3085 and apes rule, and humans are slaves or servants or peasants. Now, as with the later films, humans are intelligent beings, not essentially animals. Now, prominent among the apes in this series is Counselor Zaius, played by Booth Coleman, who is similar to the Dr. Zaius character of the original film, hiding his knowledge and suspicions of the former superiority of human beings, all while trying to keep this ape state, vital and going. And we also have Urko, security chief, played by the great Marc Leonard, yes, Spock's dad, Sarek, and the Romulan commander, who seeks to keep humans as thralls to apes at all costs. And thus, he seeks our trio of heroes. They have escaped. They must be caught, perhaps even destroyed. Now, our human heroes are Colonel Alan Verdon, played by Ron Harper. Now, Harper has shown up on this channel in a couple different times in my review of 87th Precinct, a great police show, and in my review of Land of the Lost, where he played Uncle Jack in the 3rd season. He is sort of the older and wiser member of the duo of human astronauts, actually quite a bit like the character he played in Land of the Lost. Major Peter J. Burke, played by James Naughton, is maybe a little more hot-headed than Alan, but not to the point of stupidity, but he's more likely to jump into a situation rather than thinking it all out. But both of them are decent people and are working towards, getting back to their own world, but also making the world they're in a better place, if at all possible. Now, their ape buddy is Galen, played by Roddy McDowell, a fixture of the ape films in several different roles. Here, he's a young chimpanzee who seeks reconciliation and equality between humans and apes, and he's had to defy his father to do so. So he's every bit the fugitive the other two are, but since he is an ape, he oftentimes can help get them out of situations without having to resort to violence, and they'll oftentimes pretend to be his servants or his slaves as they move around California. Now, each episode has the trio venturing into another corner of Earth's future, interacting with apes, who are sometimes good and sometimes bad, and human beings, also sometimes good and sometimes bad. And like I said, the primary goal is to escape back to their own time, which appears to be set in a world with higher technology than would have existed in our world in 1980. So they're from 1980. So let's see, the ape astronauts came to 73. This would be 7 years after that. But this does appear to maybe work off a different time. Look, it can be a little bit complicated when you're dealing with time travel. In episode 5, The Legacy, they discover an ancient computer which might hold information that they can use. But are they able to access that information? Well, you'll have to watch that episode and find out. Now, some episodes have them propagating advanced technology to both humans and apes. In episode 4, The Good Seeds, they help ape farmers improve their operations with several advancements. In episode 12, The Cure, they help an ape doctor deal with a malaria outbreak. In episode 14, Up Above the World So High, they help a human being invent manned flight. In other words, a glider. Now, the apes have some access to advanced knowledge as well through books that they have found. And the controversy for them is, were these books left by their ape ancestors? Or were they left by the humans? In episode 10, The Interrogation, Beverly Garland plays Wanda, who uses an old human book on brainwashing to try to learn things from Burke. Beverly Garland does a great job playing an ape. She was a pro. A lot of B movies, a lot of TV. She's awesome. There are some good guest stars playing apes in the series. John Hoyt is in 2 episodes as an ape governor. The first one, he has instituted gladiatorial games to try to dampen the aggressive tendencies of human beings. But there's also some good guest stars as human beings. William Smith and Marc Singer guest star in episode 2, The Gladiators, the episode I was just talking about. Morgan Woodward is in episode 9 as a farm owner whose son defies ape law against humans riding horses. Of course, Morgan Woodward in a couple different episodes of Star Trek. Sondra Locke is a woman abused by apes and humans in episode 12. And that episode also guest stars George D. Wallace, Commando Cody from the 1950s Radar Men from the Moon, which is very cool, actually. The show does a pretty good job of balancing action and more thoughtful storylines. One of my favorites had Burke and Urko trapped in an old subway station in San Francisco due to an earthquake. Urko just wants to kill Burke, but Burke has to convince him that they have to work together to get out of this thing, and at the same time, sort of trying to hide the fact that this is all human technology. It's a good episode with good performances from both Naughton and Leonard, and it's kind of a little bit like the more thoughtful stuff that we got in the original Star Trek. Now, sadly, there are only 14 episodes of Planet of the Apes, so we don't get to explore the world extensively. They're very much of their time in terms of television production. It's episodic, hitting some well-worn sci-fi themes, but it does it pretty well. It's the same kind of concept, the traveling around dealing with, people's lives that you got in The Incredible Hulk, in The Fugitive, Route 66, and very similar to the Logan's Run TV series from a few years later. In fact, you can almost imagine like the apes are on the West Coast and Logan's Run is happening on the East Coast, and in the middle of the country, I don't know, Buck Rogers in New Chicago. If you're doing role-playing games, have some fun with 70s sci-fi. There's a lot of good stuff there for you. Now, Roddy McDowell is a real plus in this series as Garland. The man always took his roles seriously no matter what they are, and he always elevates the things that he's in. And of course, by this time, he's got to be the greatest living ape actor on Earth, having been in all those different movies. Verdon and Burke work well together, sort of a Starsky and Hutch of the post-apocalyptic period. And I like their performances, and the guest stars, like I said, generally good as well. And Marc Leonard is great as Urko. Great as Urko. If you kind of know him as Sarek, it's a very different role, and he does it extremely well. The ape makeup is not as good in this series as it was in the films, which makes sense due to time and budget constraints, but it works well enough. Don't expect perfection if you're dealing with something like this. I think most ape fans will be cool with it. And the actors they can still act through the makeup. And I think that's especially because of the eyes. They're able to act through their eyes very nicely. They're all pretty good at doing the little nose thing that the apes do. The show had writers like Art Wallace, who worked on Dark Shadows and Star Trek, Edward J. Lasko, Star Trek Charlie's Angels, Robert W. Linsky, who did a bunch of Mannix, Barry Oranger did The Invaders, Ken Spears and Joe Ruby of Thundar fame wrote for an episode, Booker Bradshaw, yes, Dr. Mbenga from Star Trek, and Shimon Winselberg. He was the guy who basically invented the Vulcan mind meld. So the comparisons to Star Trek make a lot of sense. There's actually a lot of Trek people working on this show. I mean, a ton of Trek people working on this show. It is a show that's worth watching. Look, like a lot of sci-fi of the period, it was always difficult to find an audience. Now, the show was on Fridays at 8 o'clock. Now, on CBS, that put it up on ABC in the fall against Kodiak, and its second half would have been up against The $6 Million Man, which is still going pretty well. But more importantly, it was up against Sanford and Son and Chico and the Man on NBC. Both of those were hit shows, and that's kind of the problem for a lot of these things. They're more expensive to make because it's sci-fi. So they really need to have a big audience, but sci-fi is a bit of a niche. And when you put it up against, like top 20 comedies, it's going to have a real hard time. So the point of that is the show was not, in my opinion, canceled because of a lack of quality. It was just in a tough spot. You really should take a look at it, especially if you're a fan of the movies and stuff. Again, it's a slightly different version of the story you saw in the films, but not super different. And I guess if you're an Apes fan, I'm sure you've already watched this. But even if you're not, it's pretty decent sci-fi But again, it's in that 70s vein of how they did episodic sci-fi TV shows. All right. That'll do it for this review. Planet of the Apes, 1974, TV series, developed by Anthony Wilson, executive producer, Herbert Hirschmeyer, produced by Stan Hoff. And by the way, music, you got a little bit of Lalo Schifrin in there, Earl Hagen, Richard LaSalle. Solid team of people. Check it out. It's a very, very cool show. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear if you loved it, if you remember it, if you were a big fan of the whole apes phenomenon. Maybe you got the comic magazines. Maybe you had some of the Mego toys. Let's talk apes in the comments. That would be very cool. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, share with a friend. But until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. And I will see you again, hopefully soon, in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.